Wagwan, Wagwan. Welcome to the DIY Yardie channel. Welcome back if you've been here before. In this video, I'm doing an assembly of the Genesis 26-inch MENS V2100 mountain bike. This is the bike in the box. This is it out of the box. Getting some of the paperwork off of it. And we start with page 39 with the tools needed to do this job. It's a 5mm Allen, Phillips screwdriver, and also I used 5/8 or 15mm wrench. Then next we have page 13, which shows you how to do the quick release axle for the front wheel. So this is how the axle comes, and you have to take the axle apart and insert it into the front wheel hub. Okay, so you're gonna remove the adjusting nut from the axle and the spring, or one of the springs. There's one on each side, and you slide it through. Then once you slide it through, you're gonna put that spring with the smaller part of the spring pointing in back onto the axle or the quick release, and put the adjusting nut back in place. Okay, once you have that in place, then you're going to place it on the front fork of the bike. And also, I must mention that I'm doing this basically like a free flow. I'm not going by the exact step-by-step process in the manual provided. I'm just doing this like a free flow as how best it works for me. Okay, so I started with the front wheel here, and getting the front wheel and the front forks. Make sure that the axles, lock in place or line up in the proper place. I'm gonna show you the angle of it just now. Okay, so you got the quick release in place on both sides, and this front wheel will only go on one way because you notice it has disc brakes. So this green part here in the middle is a brake caliper. So the round shiny part goes in there, which is a disc, goes into the caliper. So now I'm holding the adjusting nut with one hand, and I'm turning this lever, and you see me flipping it up. So whenever it gets tight enough, then I flip it to close it. So I'm turning the adjusting nut to get it a little tight, and in order to lock down on it, you should have some tightness when you're locking down. It shouldn't just push in place very easily. Okay, that's to lock down with some kind of firmness. All right, so now I can put my kickstand down to hold the bike up, and that way I don't have to hold the bike up with my hands. I can go on to the next process, which is I'm going to go to page 20, which is the seat installation. Okay, and the seat installation is the same, or I should say similar to the front wheel, where it has this quick release. So all I have to do is tighten the quick release and lock it in place, and that way I can adjust my seat, to whatever height works for me or for you, the rider. All right. So you turn, and remember, you have to have some resistance when you're locking it down. You shouldn't just be able to push down very easily. Next, I go to page 18, and that shows the handlebar installation. So this is the cap and bolt for the handlebar. So you have to remove that and take that round piece of cardboard there out of there. Okay, so you use your 5mm Allen to remove that bolt and get the cap and bolt removed. Then you'll be able to install the handlebar in that position. All right, so get that off. Remove the cardboard. And once the cardboard is removed, this is what it looks like, the cap and the bolt. And then you're going to get the handlebar and you'll notice the handlebar has like that green arrow or green triangle that should be pointing down. Okay, so now this handlebar, the way these forks are adjusted, it's actually adjusted by the handlebar. Okay, so you put that cap in place and you tighten down on that cap a little bit, and that's what tightens your front forks. Okay, so you want to shake it and tighten, as you go, and then you feel what you can do is you can hold the brakes, hold the front brake, and rock the bike back and forth and see, if the play goes away from the front fork. You want to get the least amount of play possible in that front fork without it being too tight. Okay, the front wheel should be able to turn, left or right in either direction very easily. But at the same time, you don't want to have too much play in that front, in the forks. Okay, so I'm comfortable with where I have it, so I'm starting to snug these bolts down. But you also have to make sure that the you can see here where I have the camera pointing down, that neck, yeah, okay, the neck of the handlebars has to line up with the front wheel. Okay, so straight, yeah, you want to look straight from the top down, and it should be in perfect alignment with the front wheel. Then you go ahead and you tighten down from there. Okay, tighten up these bolts. And you're using your 5mm Allen. Okay, so once you get these bolts tightened, then you can torque down some more on your the cap, the cover cap. Okay, you don't want to torque your cover cap before you tighten these bolts. If you torque the cover cap before you tighten these bolts, it'll make your steering wheel too tight. In order for the steering wheel to turn freely, I mean. Now from there, then you can do the cover cap. Okay. And also, another thing with this bike is you want to check, everything over. Although a lot of the things are pre-assembled on this bike, still go ahead and check them over, because I did find, some of the, some bolts and screws were loose. They were just snug. They weren't tightened down enough. So definitely go ahead and check everything over and make sure everything is tight before you, completely assemble on this bike. All right, what I'm doing here is I'm repositioning the handlebar, the brakes. After I installed the handlebars, the brakes were pointing up a little bit too high. So I loosened these two bolts on the cap of the steering wheel. I recentered the handlebars and pointed the brakes down at a slight, I would say maybe a 45-degree angle, to be more comfortable for me, the rider. Okay, so once I got the handlebars recentered and in the right position where I was comfortable with, then I retightened them with the 5mm Allen. Okay, so like I said, remember to check over this bike. You know, just because it comes, mostly pre-assembled, don't assume everything is tight. Okay, go ahead and double check everything. Make sure everything is tight. All the screws, nuts, bolts. Okay, this reflector goes up here, and you tighten that down with the Phillips screwdriver. All right, so now moving on to page 15, which are the pedals. Now the pedals, they're labeled, left pedal for left, right pedal for right. And it also shows you the direction that the pedal screws in to the crank. Okay, it has an arrow pointing there showing you. So you just put the pedal, and this one is like it seems weird because you're actually going counterclockwise, but that's the way the thread works. As you ride this bike, it has to be threaded in where it won't work itself loose as you're pedaling. Okay, So that's the reason why the thread is backwards, basically. Okay. So got the pedal on. Now I'm using my wrench to tighten it down. And like I said, you can either use a 15 or a 5/8 wrench for this part. And the bolt in the middle of the crank there also, you want to double check to make sure that bolt is pretty tight. And that bolt, actually you need a 14mm socket for that one. Okay, but it's best to check all these bolts and make sure they're tight. Bolts, nuts, screws, everything before you get on this bike, because you know you definitely want to make sure everything is tight. You don't want to get out there and start riding and something falls apart on you. Okay, so getting this torqued down, as tight as I can get it. And what you can do is, while you're doing this, you hold the brake with one hand, and as you tighten with the other hand, that way the bike won't move, while you're putting the pressure with the wrench on the crank or on the pedals to tighten up. Okay. All right. So, and as I said, remember, the right is labeled right, and they're color coded also, because the left is green and the right is a kind of orange, with a red circle, or yellow with a red circle. Okay. So I'm going to get this tightened down. And I'm holding the brake with the other hand to keep the bike from moving. You want to get those as tight as you can. Or you could probably get someone to help you at that point to hold the pedals from spinning. Okay, so now I'm going to page 24, which shows the adjustment of the brakes. And at before you ride this bike, you want to make sure to squeeze the brake pedal, the brake levers. Squeeze the brake levers, at least 6 or 7 times. Firm squeeze to make sure they're seated properly. All right. And also you want to make sure that your brakes are centered and they're not rubbing on the rim. Okay, so what you can do is you can spin the wheel, and make sure it doesn't rub. And what you see me here, what I'm doing with the Phillips screwdriver, is I'm adjusting or putting some more tension on this brake caliper. So if one side rubs and the other side is free, you want to put more tension on the side that rubs. You put tension by turning the screw inward into the caliper and smashing the brakes a few times. Okay, so now I'm on to page 35, which shows the adjustment of the gears, or how to adjust the gears. All right, so basically what I'm doing here is I'm running through the gears, and the gears are on the handlebar, and there's one click for each gear. So you pedal, and you turn one click, and for each click it should move one gear. Okay, if it's not moving, like the way it should, or if it's making a noise when it's in the gear, then you turn this adjuster here that you see me turning, the shiny part. You either turn inward or outward to get the desired adjustment that you're trying to receive or achieve. Okay, so it's pretty smooth here. And remember, as you ride, these cables are going to stretch, and you're going to need to adjust them over time. So that's why they make these adjusters on here. All right, so the bike is completely assembled, pumped up the tires, took it for a test ride, and it's a nice riding bike. Hope you enjoy this assembly. Please consider subscribing to my channel, DIY Yardie. Bless up.